Hello and welcome to our webinar, 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's. I'm Mike Bias from the Alzheimer's Association in Illinois. And before I introduce our speaker, who's just below me, I want to give you a quick orientation to your screen. On the left of your screen, you'll see the PowerPoint slides, and that's where you'll be getting a lot of the information there today. Directly below our webcams, you'll see two pods. The first is called the Program Notes pod. Now, if you're joining us live, you can click there to download the participant guide. And if you're not joining us live, you can get the participant guide downloaded at alzwebinars.org, right next to where you click the link to watch this recording. Below that, you'll see links to more resources. The first says Alzheimer's phone programs. Now that will take you to alzphoneprograms.org. If you're joining us live, that's an active pod. And at alzphoneprograms.org, you'll see monthly programs by phone. They're audio only, no video, where you can dial in and listen to a different expert be interviewed about a different topic that affects Alzheimer's and families. You can also go to the bottom of that website at alzphoneprograms.org, and there you can listen to previous recordings from the months in the past. Below that, the other link to more resources, online education courses. If you click that, it'll take you to alz.org/learn. Now there, you'll be able to watch 30, 45, and 60-minute webinars, recorded presentations about the disease, and also how to become a better, more effective caregiver. That again is alz.org/learn. Now, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see the Q&A pod. That's where you can type in your comments or questions for our presenter today, and toward the end of our hour together, she will take those questions. And we're the only ones who can see those. Those are confidential. Other people will not be able to see your questions. Again, that's if you're joining us live. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Rose Pagonis is joining us today from Northern Illinois. She's a real estate broker in Naperville, Illinois, and the co-owner of the Pagonis Group. She's volunteered for the Alzheimer's Association Illinois chapter for several years in several different capacities, including what she's doing today as a community educator. She brings passion about fighting this disease as well as years of experience as the primary caregiver for her mother who had Alzheimer's. Welcome, Rose. How are you today?
Hi, Mike. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 signs of Alzheimer's, the warning signs, and we're going to explore the most common warning signs to help you be informed about what is normal aging and what is not. So by the end of today's program, the goal is for you to be able to describe typical age-related memory, thinking or behavior changes, recognize common warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, discuss the tips for approaching someone about memory concerns, explain the importance of early detection and benefits of diagnosis, identify possible tests and assessment for the diagnostic process, and name the resources available through the Alzheimer's Association. Throughout today's presentation, we'll periodically check in with the Garcias, a fictitious family following along as Mary's daughters discuss their mother's memory changes and take action to find the cause. Please note that the Garcias' experience may not be common, but it does represent the exact experience. It does not represent the exact experience for everyone. The situations vary from person to person. So let's meet the Garcia women. Mary's a 73-year-old widow. She lives alone. She's a retired teacher who has always meticulously cared for her home. Her daughter Lydia has recently been noticing laundry pileup and junk mail and old newspapers lying around the house. Lydia is the eldest of Mary's two daughters. She lives just a few miles away and visits her mom frequently. Patricia lives in another state. She works long hours and isn't able to visit her mother as often as she'd like. She communicates with Mary and Lydia frequently via phone and text messaging. Worried about Mom, she keeps losing things and the house is a mess. Probably normal to get a little forgetful with age. It's so unlike her. Should we worry? Let's reach out to our old neighbor, Dr. Soloway. Dr. Soloway is an expert with Alzheimer's disease, and we'll hear about from him next.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more noticeable for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
Dr. Salloway gave us a great recap. It's important to remember that these memory signs are intended to be a guide to help identify problems in memory, thinking, or behavior may be related to Alzheimer's or to another dementia. Individuals may experience one or all of these signs in varying degrees, and the numerous and single occurrences, that they do not have to experience them all at the same time. In the next model, we're going to talk about early detection. The first one, and identify what's dementia and what's Alzheimer's disease. The first one is, what is dementia?
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
What is Alzheimer's disease?
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things. But when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with.
The 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Number 1 is memory loss, and that it disrupts daily life. One of the most common signs is forgetting important dates or events, asking the same questions over and over, increasingly relying on memory aids such as writing notes or family members for tasks conformally managed with ease. So for my mom as an example, and asking the same questions over and over again. What happens with that is that we all know that when they're asking us a question, it could possibly be a sign. Forgetting important dates, if your mom or dad call you for your birthday or they call you for an anniversary or something, those calls stop coming in. It could be that they're just forgetful, and it's a sign of dementia. What's typical age-related change is sometimes forgetting names or appointments, but remembering them later. So, for instance, you're at a party, you know that you know the person, but you just can't remember their name. And then a little bit later, you remember it maybe driving in the car or, later that evening. That's typical age-related change. The second sign is some people may experience changes in their ability to develop and follow a plan or work with numbers, which may result in trouble following a familiar recipe or keeping track of monthly bills, or difficulty in concentrating and taking much longer to complete tasks. Keeping track of monthly bills is a good example because you may not remember, or the person may not remember the time of month or when the bills are due unless they're written down. Now, what's typical age-related change? Making occasional errors when managing finances or household bills. We're going to hear from John and what the signs look like for him.
I was probably spending 4 to 5 times more time preparing for something than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because of I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking I was in my sleep, I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was I was trying to remember, which was I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was really a vicious circle so I was able to control it a lot, so that people wouldn't see things and there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
The third warning sign is people living with dementia commonly have difficulty completing daily tasks, such as driving to a familiar location. A sign of this was my uncle. Not only did my mom have Alzheimer's, but my uncle also had Alzheimer's. He was driving and he was going to visit his son, and he ended up 40 miles away from his home, and his son was only a few miles away. So the police had to call the family, and they came and picked him up and brought him back home. That's a sign. Organizing a grocery list. If someone knows that they go to the grocery store and they have regular groceries that they buy, milk, eggs, bread, butter, and they go to the grocery store and they can't organize their thoughts of what they need, that could be a sign. And remembering the rules of a favorite game. Now, what's typical age-related change is occasionally needing help to use the settings on the microwave or record a television show. For the way technology is changing, it's not difficult to get confused sometimes. And we'll hear from an expert on that.
Some people have difficulty with math or with reading in a way that's unusual to them. And once again, this is a change in that person. So for example, we all know somebody who was never able to balance their checkbook, right? So that wouldn't be a warning sign for them. But if somebody who always balanced their checkbook to the penny suddenly was paying bills, the same bill over and over, and not able to balance their finances, well, that would be a sign for them.
The fourth sign is people living with Alzheimer's or other dementias can lose track of dates, seasons, passage of time. They may have trouble understanding something if it's not happening immediately, or forget where they are or how they got there. An example I can give you of that of my mom was that she would think spring or summer was winter, fall was spring. Her seasons, she never really understood them or remembered them. Now, what's typical age-related change? Getting confused about the day of the week, but figuring it out later. As I mentioned earlier, with technology changing and also a lot of people maybe working from home or not having a 9-to-5 job, sometimes we have to check our phones to see what date is it or what's the day of the week. If it happens once in a while, it's a typical age-related change. Number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. For some people, having vision problems is a sign of dementia, which may lead to difficulty with balance, trouble reading. Someone could be a voracious reader, and all of a sudden they're reading the same page over and over again with really not understanding what is being said. Or problems judging distance and determining color or contrast, which may cause issues with driving, or like blowing the stop sign or driving in the middle of the lane. Our expert will explain more.
Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It can affect other things too. It can affect the way that we perceive what we see. So sometimes somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's might go to the eye doctor because they're having trouble seeing, and in fact, their vision is just fine, but the way they're perceiving what they're seeing may be difficult.
The sixth sign is people living with Alzheimer's may have trouble following or joining a conversation. They may stop in the middle of a conversation and have no idea how to continue. And with my mom, when we used to talk with her and sit around the kitchen table and maybe have coffee, we would be in the middle of a conversation and all of a sudden, she would stop. And in the beginning, we thought, okay, well, what's going on here? You know what? She was just forgetting. She didn't know how to finish that sentence or that thought. Or they repeat themselves. Repeating themselves is pretty common, and we always question it. Wait a minute, they're repeating themselves over and over again. Or struggle with vocabulary. For instance, looking at the watch and saying it's calling it a hand clock. Or having trouble naming a familiar object or using the wrong name. So what's typical age-related change? Sometimes having trouble finding the right word. For instance, wanting to say the color blue and thinking of something else, but not really kind of thinking up with blue. And sometimes that happens. So let's hear from Phil and see what he has to say about our sixth sign.
The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
And our seventh signs, a person living with Alzheimer's may put things in unusual places. He or she may lose things and be unable to go back over their steps to find them. For instance, you come in from the garage, you put your keys on a little basket next to a table, you hang up your coat, you go on to the next one. Someone may, but you could go back and retrace your steps. With someone with memory loss may not be able to retrace those steps, or accuse others of stealing, which may occur more frequently over time. And this is something that I experienced with my mom. She always thought we were stealing her money and would get stuck on that. So what are typical age-related change? Misplacing things from time to time and retracing steps to find them. For instance, coming in from the garage, putting your keys in the basket, hanging up your coat, going about doing everything else. If you misplace your keys and put them in your coat, you'd go into the garage, say, wait a minute, I go from the garage, put the keys in the basket. I went ahead and hung up my coat. Maybe my keys are in my coat. That's retracing steps, and that's common for typical age-related change. Now, next, let's hear from our next expert on this topic.
So some people wonder if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say about that is, for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it. We can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in, they set their keys down in an unusual space, so there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably remember, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door. I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
Our eighth sign, people living with Alzheimer's may experience changes in judgment or decision making. They may use poor judgment when dealing with money, maybe ordering everything online or from Amazon and having it delivered, or possibly having someone come to their door and them writing a check for services that they may not receive, or pay less attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean. This is something that I noticed a lot with my mom, especially in the beginning. When she would come over, she started coming over not matched up, and I think, like, how did she even manage to put that outfit together? Of course, my dad was oblivious to the whole thing, and he thought she looked fine, but she stopped dressing the way that she used to, and I just started noticing, that she wasn't coming as prepared. Or when they would spend the weekend with me, and I'd say, hey, Mom, take a shower, we're going to go to church. She would never want to take a shower, but would tell me she took a shower. So those were some of the early signs. Now, what's typical age-related change? Making a bad decision or mistake once in a while maybe neglecting to change the oil in the car. Let's hear from Teresa and see what that change was like for her.
The way I kept my house, I wouldn't say I was OCD, but pretty close to it. And all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like I was a pet wreck, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
Our ninth sign is withdrawal from work or social activities. A person living with dementia may experience changes in the ability to hold or follow a conversation, and as a result, he or she may withdraw from hobbies, social activities, or other engagements, or have trouble keeping up with a favorite team or activity. For my mom, it was playing cards. She played cards with my dad endlessly, and all of a sudden, she just didn't know how to play the games that she played for years with them, and her memory started to deteriorate. What's typical age-related change? Sometimes feeling uninterested in family or social engagements. Sometimes you just don't want to go somewhere, and that's okay. That's typical age-related change. Let's hear from Dr. Salloway next.
One of the most common changes, and early on, is the person's comfort zone shrinks a little bit. and then that gets worse throughout the course of the illness. So they're less comfortable going out, they're less motivated to do things than they were in the past. So there's some change in day-to-day functioning that way. I think people also lose confidence in their cognitive abilities because they may not recognize someone or know their name or find the right word, and they'll feel awkward, and they don't want people to notice that, so they feel more comfortable at home or in situations with family where they're very, very comfortable with that wouldn't concern them. So people tend to withdraw a little bit and be less outgoing. That's can be one of the early signs of Alzheimer's.
And our 10th sign is changes in mood and personality. What are possible signs of dementia? Whoops. Individuals with Alzheimer's or other dementias may become confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. They might get easily upset, either at home or when out of their comfort zone. As we age, however, it's normal to develop very specific ways of doing things and becoming upset or irritable when our routine is disrupted. So someone with Alzheimer's or dementia may become fearful, angry, or easily frustrated. Dr. Salloway will share more.
Another early sign of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more easily irritated, or more impatient, or a little moody, or have a shorter fuse, or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
So interpreting the signs and detecting the next steps. So let's check in with the Garcias again. As we talked earlier, Mary's daughters are concerned about the changes they're observing in their mom. They want to know when it's time to see a doctor and about the changes they've witnessed. So let's take a look at their conversation. Did you look at the warning signs info I sent? I did, but still don't know. Mom's showing a couple of signs, but not all the time. How do we know if it's serious enough to see a doctor? Well, let's check with Dr. Salloway again.
Memory is not all or none, especially when there are early symptoms or signs. So on a good day, people might function very well and not really no one notices there's a memory problem. But on other days, especially if they're tired, then things become more noticeable. So memory is variable. It's not all or none. And then there are different type of symptoms that develop for each person. So some people may have trouble with language, may have trouble with organizing themselves, may have trouble navigating while driving, and other people don't have the same symptoms. So you don't have to have every symptom of Alzheimer's to be concerned. And I think the most important thing is determining what has changed from that person's normal level of functioning. And usually people have a pretty keen sense of, what they can normally do well. And then when either they or the family notice that there has been some change from that usual pattern of functioning, that should be a warning sign to people. But they don't have to check off all the boxes.
So let's do a recap on the 10 signs. These 10 signs are a guide to identify problems that may be related to Alzheimer's. Individuals may experience one or multiple warning signs in varying degrees, but they don't have to experience them all or there to be a concern. If you notice that any of these signs in yourself or someone else, it's important to see a doctor. And the importance of early detection. Let's hear from the expert.
It's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, in more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot, and the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it, and they say, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. And they say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
Let's see what Mary noticed.
Adamant about what was happening to Daryl. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. And this wasn't the person that I know. This wasn't the person. Daryl was my husband was very, he always had to be building or designing or working with his hands. And it was getting to the point where he wasn't, and he was becoming very frustrated when he was forgetting to do things or go places.
What should you do if you notice changes in someone? So if you continue to observe these changes, it's critical that you plan to take the next step. We will go through and assess the situation. Step 1, what changes in memory, thinking, or behavior do you see? What else is going on? Various conditions can cause changes in memory, thinking, or behavior. Are there such health or lifestyle issues like stress, diabetes, a change of medication that could be causing this? Step 3, learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. Learn if you've already taken every important step by joining us today, that you're on your way. Did you notice any of these signs in the person that you're concerned about? Has anyone else noticed the changes that you have observed? And talk with your friends, family, and what are some of the changes they noticed? For instance, with my mom, I asked my aunt, I said, hey, are you noticing any changes in my mom? She says, well, I don't want to say anything, but yeah, this is what I noticed. I'm like, okay, if there's someone else. And then I asked someone else, and, reluctantly, they told me the same thing. So now, other people were noticing. And have a conversation. Who should be the one to discuss these concerns with a person? It could be you, a trusted family member or friend, or a combination. Usually it's better to speak one-on-one so that the person doesn't feel threatened or attacked. But use what you know about the person to judge the situation and see what approach is best. Maybe find out the time of day that works best for them and have the conversation then. Who should have the conversation to discuss their concerns? There's going to be a person that they may be more comfortable with. See who that is and address them one by one. What is the best time and place to have this conversation? As I mentioned earlier, it could be the time of day, or maybe they want to sit in their favorite chair or in the favorite room of the house. And maybe it's a date or a time, and you should consider all of these before you go in and speak with them. Make sure that they're comfortable. What will you or the person having the conversation say? Something that you could start with is say, I have noticed that you have been repeating yourself. Are you noticing that as well? Or how have you been feeling lately? You just don't seem like you're yourself. And give them the opportunity to answer. Maybe it's something completely unrelated. Or say, I noticed that you, and whatever you notice, let them know that. And it worried me. Has anything else like that happened? 8, offer to go with them to the doctor. And there are a lot of things that could be causing this. Let's see if the doctor can help us figure out a solution, approach it from that aspect. And see, the sooner we know what's causing the problems, the sooner we can address it. And I think you can give us both peace of mind if we spoke with a doctor. And if needed, have multiple conversations. Don't be discouraged if the first conversation is not as successful as you'd like it to be. Write down your notes about how it went and maybe prepare for future conversations. It may take several conversations for them to maybe come to terms with it. And don't dismiss the changes you're noticing simply because a person is reluctant to address them or the conversation didn't go as planned. And then finally, reach out for support. You can turn to the Alzheimer's Association, call our 24/7 helpline to talk with master's level clinicians who can provide reliable support and information, including on how to have this very important conversation. And see a doctor. With my mom, when we took her to her doctor, and I told him all the signs she was having, he dismissed them and said, well, you know, she's depressed, your brother is single, he's not married, you know, she's very worried about that. And I said, my brother's marital status should have nothing to do with my mom's memory. But, you know, he kind of dismissed it. Finally, we brought her to our neurologist and we got our diagnosis. So some specialists that you may see may include a geriatrician, a neurologist, a neuropsychologist, a psychiatrist, or a psychologist. What are the benefits for early detection? Let's hear from our expert.
There are a number of benefits in early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Also, the treatments that are available for Alzheimer's don't cure Alzheimer's. They don't slow down the disease, but they do help with symptoms. And it seems as though they tend to work better the earlier a person is able to use those. So that can help too. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
Importance of early detection. Let's do a recap. So pay attention to any changes in memory, thinking, or behavior that you notice in people. And if you see changes that are unusual for the person, take action by having a conversation. Discussing these types of concerns may be difficult, but consider using the 10 steps to approach memory concerns as a guide. And there are a number of other benefits to early detection, including planning for the future, access to treatments of symptoms, and participation in clinical studies. Now, seeking a diagnosis, let's test our knowledge. There is currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. That's false. There are a number of assessments and tests that make it possible for early care professionals to diagnose Alzheimer's with a high degree of certainty. Now, let's take a look at Mary Garcia. She's 73. The assessments may include medical history, physical exam, screen for depression, interview with close companion, and tests may include laboratory tests, mental cognitive status tests, and brain imaging. And keep in mind that some or all of these tests may be given. Do dementia-like symptoms always result in a diagnosis for Alzheimer's or other dementias? Let's ask Dr. Solway and if something could be done or something else, if it's something else.
Someone could have high blood pressure that's out of control, or they might have a thyroid condition that's not regulated, or diabetes that's not right, or on a medication that actually can cause memory loss. Drinking too much alcohol can make memory worse. So there are a lot of factors that go into cognitive difficulty with aging that some of them can be remedied. And so we want to do everything we can to improve cognitive ability and quality of life.
Seeking a diagnosis recap. So the diagnostic experience may vary from person to person. Something other than Alzheimer's or other dementia could be causing the symptoms, and the stigma and misconceptions about the disease, like believing that something or that nothing can be done, can prevent some people from seeking diagnosis. And in my situation, there was a stigma to my mom having Alzheimer's. She was 69, and my family, they didn't really want it to be known that my mom had Alzheimer's. And coming to the association and getting help was something that really helped us with that. So what's next when the diagnosis is Alzheimer's? Let's go back to Mary's situation. I called but got your voicemail. How did it go? Call you later when I get home, but the diagnosis is early stage Alzheimer's. Oh no, what could we do now? Doc said the Alzheimer's Association offers free resources. Some will even help people live well with the disease. We'll call soon, but left the office with some hope. The Alzheimer's Association, the mission is, the Alzheimer's Association is the leading voluntary health organization in Alzheimer's care, support, and research. Our mission is to eliminate Alzheimer's disease through the advancement of research, to provide and enhance care and support for all affected, and to reduce the risk of dementia through the promotion of brain health. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease. We're available wherever and whenever you need reliable information and support. First, on the phone, 24/7 helpline.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center when I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did, was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
And next we'll hear from Teresa.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has this been around, how many people are affected by this, where can I go for resources, where can I go for help, what do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
And next, let's hear from Tom, who's living with Alzheimer's disease.
Since I've been diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
I've had a couple of
And next, I will turn you back to Mike, and he will tell us more about the Alzheimer's Association.
Well, thank you, Rose. At this point, if anybody has any questions, you can type them into the chat pod if you're joining us live. Couple things about the resources. We talked already about the resources. We saw those 3 video clips, but just to let you know, the 24/7 nationwide helpline, it's so important. We really recommend that you get out your smartphone and put this into your contacts. So 800-272-3900. You can call anytime, day or night. It's nationwide. And what are you going to call for? Well, sometimes people call and they say, my doctor told me to call. We just got a diagnosis. I don't even know what to ask. And that's okay, because trained specialists know what to tell you and they know what questions that you should be asking. But some of the most common things are support groups. There may be support groups meeting in your area at a convenient time for you to go to. And a lot of people have hesitation about going there. I don't want to go and talk about my problems in front of a bunch of perfect strangers, but I'd urge you to try it out, because everyone there, at one time or another, it was their first time, and they know how you feel. And what you typically do is you just go to the support group meeting saying, I'm going to go, I'm going to sit, I'm not going to say a word other than hi and tell them your name, and that's it. You'll frequently find out that many people who went there saying, I'm not going to say a word, they get so much from listening to the other people. They say, wow, I'm not the only one. And they understand, they listen to other people talking about the same problems they have. They sometimes end up talking themselves. But whether you talk or not, that's up to you. Education programs is something that's very important, because sometimes there's going to be an educator in your area at a senior center or a library doing a live program, or you can learn about virtual programs like this webinar that are going on that you can take advantage of that will teach you more about the disease and how to be a more effective caregiver. Information and referrals. Now, this is a very important thing that people will contact the Alzheimer's Association for, but you need to know that we have a very strict non-endorsement policy. That is, we will, whether you're calling to find out the name of a neurologist in your area or a residential facility or in-home care or what have you, we will not recommend one over another. We have a non-endorsement policy. We will give you a list of all the providers in your area and then a tip sheet, which you can get via snail mail or email, what have you. And that will give you some questions to ask so that you can decide for yourself who's going to be the best possible provider for me in my situation. Now, some people, instead of calling the helpline, they're kind of like me. They like to let their fingers do the walking. And what they want to do is they want to type everything out on the internet, and that's fine. You can go to alz.org and find anything that you need on our website. But if you can't find it in 2 or 3 clicks, call the helpline. They'll tell you where to find it. Now, another thing, if you're specifically looking for resources, you can go directly to communityresourcefinder.org or alz.org/CRF, which stands for Community Resource Finder. Now there you're going to get the same ability. Instead of asking someone over the phone, you can type in, here's my zip code, I'm looking for this neurologist, or I'm looking for a residential facility or in-home care. And then you can say, I want to find all the providers within 25 miles or 50 miles or 100-mile radius. And there you can self-serve at the Community Resource Finder. And finally, if you want more education, of course you've got alzwebinars.org, which is where you found this webinar, but you can also go to alz.org/learn, where you'll find recorded presentations, 30, 45, and 60 minutes long, about different topics dealing with Alzheimer's. Again, the disease and how to be a more effective caregiver. So quite a lot to do, a lot of resources, and everything we do is for free. You don't have to worry about that. So with that, I want to see if we've got some questions for Rose here. Rose, one person would like to know, my sister doesn't seem to be on board understanding the severity of this disease. She's thinking that mom might just get better. Do you have any suggestions how I can get my sister?
Well, not the entire family will come on board at the same time. Sometimes, like in my situation, I was the first one that noticed something, and I just kept on going with my gut, and slowly everyone came on board. It wasn't the time for judgment or to have a family argument. We had enough to stress about. So I just believe that get the information, get connected, give them resources. You get resources yourself through the Alzheimer's Association. Speak to an expert and keep moving on. The more information that you have, the better it will be on how to discuss it with your family. Be equipped.
Okay. Now, just for if they call the helpline, does the helpline have a magic wand where they can hit a family member in the head and help them understand what's going on, or that's not something that's
No,
available?
that's not what's available, but what's available is to get answers to your questions so you can have the answers that you need. The more questions that are answered for you, the better you're able to stay calm and just discuss with family members. And you know what? They're going to come to it when they come to it. I kept in mind what was most important in the moment, and that was my mom's care.
And one other thing is sometimes a sibling, and it's usually adult siblings, they just can't hear it from you, but they can hear it from another person, like a doctor. Or in the case of the Alzheimer's Association, we have something called a care consultation. And if you can't all get everybody into a local office, that's not a problem. They can do this over the phone. And frequently there's one member of the family that's in one state and other members of the family in another state. And if you call the 800 number, you can set up a care consultation. And very frequently, that care consultant will say something in just the right way that you've been saying for weeks and months, and your brother or your sister will suddenly get it. The light bulb will go off, and it's very, very helpful to have that objective third party helping to get alignment from all of the family members. We have time for one more question, Rose. You listed 10 warning signs. Do they always appear
They
in that
don't,
order?
and there may only be a few of them that they have. And again, that's why it's very important to at least see a doctor and have a baseline of where you're at. With my mom, she only showed a few of the signs, but they were pretty strong signs. And then we just took it from there. And you know what? As we went along, more and more showed up. But because we had early detection, um, what helped us was that we had time to really wrap our mind around it and what was going on. And then, more signs showed up.
Right. And the 10 signs, the warning signs, which you can review at alz.org, or if you're joining us live, you can click down in the program notes pod and download the participant guide, or at alzwebinars.org, next to the link that you clicked to join this webinar or view the recording is going to be a link for the program notes or the participant guide. In there, as you go through those 10 warning signs, remember that yes, any one of those 10 can be the very first warning sign that you notice. It's usually memory, but not always. And the other thing is that sometimes, if it's grandma and grandpa, there's some shame going on or some stigma, and grandma might be masking some of the symptoms for grandpa because she doesn't want anyone to know. We see that all the time. Oh, honey, grandpa would love to read your report card, but he doesn't have his glasses. Let me read it for him, because she doesn't want anyone to know that he can't read anymore. So all that to say, any of the 10 signs can be the very first sign that appears. That is about all the time we have for today. Rose Pagonis, thank you so much for giving of your time and of yourself to give us a great perspective
Thank you,
on
Mike.
warning signs. And thank you all for logging in. I hope that all of you will go to alzwebinars.org, share this webinar with friends and family, and join us for a future webinar. Have a great day.